The summer morning was quiet, the sort of peace that feels earned after years of routine. Our suburban neighborhood bustled faintly in the distance, birds chirped, and the occasional hum of a lawnmower punctuated the air. I sat at the breakfast table, savoring the last sip of my coffee, while Amanda, my wife of 15 years, fussed with the kids. Sarah, our 12-year-old, argued with her younger brother Ben over cereal portions, Amanda trying half-heartedly to mediate. It was a snapshot of domestic bliss, the kind of scene we were supposed to cherish. But lately, these moments felt scripted, like we were actors reciting lines we barely believed in anymore. Amanda seemed distracted. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and she snatched it up quickly, glancing at the screen before tucking it into her pocket. My stomach tightened. I hadn't been snooping, but I'd noticed patterns, late-night texts, sudden laughter over something she never shared, and the new habit of keeping her phone face down. At first, I ignored it. Suspicion seemed unworthy of us. We'd built a life together, 2 kids, a house, and dreams fulfilled. Amanda had never given me a reason to doubt her. Until now. "David, can you drop the kids at school today?" "I have an early meeting," she asked, breezing past me to grab her purse. "Sure," I said, watching her carefully. She kissed Sarah on the top of her head, ruffled Ben's hair, and gave me a fleeting peck on the cheek. The door closed behind her, and the house fell silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. That moment stuck with me throughout the day. Amanda's demeanor, the rushed goodbye, it wasn't like her. She was always composed, warm, attentive. But something had shifted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something critical. The real unraveling began a week later, when I found Amanda's old phone in the garage. I'd been organizing tools and clearing out boxes of forgotten junk when I stumbled upon it, buried under a stack of manuals. It was dusty, its screen slightly cracked, but curiosity nudged me to plug it in. After all, it had probably been sitting there for years. When it powered on, I didn't expect much, maybe old photos of the kids or apps we hadn't used in ages. But as I scrolled through, my breath hitched. There were messages. Dozens of them. Most were innocuous, the kind of mundane exchanges you'd expect. Then I saw his name, Greg. Greg's messages weren't mundane. They were playful, flirtatious, and threaded with a level of intimacy that made my chest tighten. "Wish you were here. Counting the days until our next getaway. Last night was perfect. I can still smell your perfume." My pulse thundered as I pieced together the timeline. These weren't recent messages, they were from months ago, maybe even a year. But the implications were clear, Amanda had been hiding something significant. I spent the next few hours combing through every detail, bank transfers, locations mentioned in the messages, and even a few saved photos. There was a selfie of Amanda, smiling in a way that felt too personal, too exclusive. It wasn't for me. It was for him. I sat in the garage long after I'd drained the battery on her old phone, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? How had I missed it? The signs had been there, the guarded conversations, the unexplained absences. But I'd ignored them, brushing off my instincts in the name of trust. That night, I lay awake beside Amanda, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. She seemed at peace, unaware of the storm brewing within me. I wanted to shake her awake, to demand answers, but I didn't. Not yet. My emotions were a volatile mix of anger, heartbreak, and betrayal, but I needed to act deliberately. The next morning, while Amanda was in the shower, I slipped into her office and opened her laptop. It was password protected, but after years of marriage, I knew her well enough to guess. It took 2 tries. Once inside, I found email chains, confirmations for weekend trips I hadn't known about, and photos of her with Greg, smiling at a restaurant, standing close on a beach. The pieces clicked together with devastating clarity. She had betrayed me, betrayed us. My wife, the woman I'd shared my life with, had chosen someone else. By the time Amanda emerged from the bathroom, I was seated at the kitchen table, gripping a mug of cold coffee. I'd seen enough to confirm what my gut had been screaming at me for weeks, but now wasn't the time for confrontation. If this was going to end, it needed to end on my terms. I had to plan. In the days that followed, I buried myself in preparation. I contacted a private investigator, gathering indisputable evidence to ensure that if this led to divorce, I wouldn't be the one left scrambling. I met with a lawyer to understand my options and protect what mattered most, my children. Amanda, oblivious, carried on as though nothing had changed. She still kissed me goodnight, cooked dinner, and asked about my day. But every shared moment felt hollow, a charade I endured while counting down to the inevitable confrontation. I chose her birthday as the stage. It wasn't out of spite, though some might think so. It was about timing, ensuring there were witnesses to the truth I'd uncovered. If Amanda was willing to gamble our life together for a man like Greg, then she would have to face the consequences in full view. By the time her birthday arrived, my resolve was steel. Amanda deserved to know that I discovered her secrets, but more importantly, I needed to reclaim my dignity. As I stood before the family and friends gathered to celebrate her, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was the beginning of the end, but it was also the start of something new, a chance to break free from the lies and rebuild what mattered most. When the moment came to deliver my toast, Amanda smiled up at me, completely unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. The restaurant buzzed with warm conversation and clinking silverware. Friends and family gathered around the long table, their faces glowing in the soft, ambient light. Amanda sat at the center, radiant in her blue dress, her blonde hair framing her face. She was every bit the picture of a happy wife, graciously thanking everyone for attending her birthday dinner. My hands trembled slightly as I held up my glass, and the room quieted. "I'd like to make a toast," I began, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside me. Amanda turned toward me, her expression glowing with affection and curiosity. "To Amanda," I continued, pausing for effect. "My wife of 15 years, the mother of our beautiful children, and the woman who has shared countless memories with me." A soft chorus of cheers followed, and Amanda blushed, reaching for her glass. But I wasn't finished. I raised my hand, and the room stilled again. Over these years, Amanda has been a partner in every sense of the word. We've built a life together, a life that I've cherished. But tonight, I feel compelled to share something with all of you. Something she might have neglected to tell me, or us. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Amanda's smile faltered, her brows furrowing. "David," she whispered, a hint of warning in her voice. "I think you all deserve to know about Greg," I said, my tone even and calm. Gasps rippled through the room. Amanda's eyes widened, and her complexion turned ashen. "Greg," I repeated, sliding the manila envelope I'd prepared across the table toward her. A name I only recently learned, but one that's been a part of Amanda's life for over a year. "David, what are you doing?" she hissed, her voice low but trembling. Ignoring her, I continued. "Inside this envelope are pictures, messages, and bank records, all evidence of Amanda's relationship with him. Evidence she's hidden from me, her husband, and from you, her family and friends." Amanda's father, seated nearby, was the first to speak. "What is he talking about, Amanda?" His voice was stern, almost commanding. She looked around the room, her eyes darting from face to face as if searching for an escape. "It's not what you think," she blurted out. "David, please. Can we talk about this later? Privately." "Privately?" I echoed, letting out a bitter laugh. "Was your affair private when you spent our family's money on hotels and gifts for him? Was it private when you lied to me about working late or going on business trips? Because I assure you, Amanda, your deceit is very public now." Her face contorted with anger and desperation. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. It wasn't. It wasn't like that. It was just. Don't you dare minimize this, I cut in sharply. You didn't accidentally meet Greg. You didn't accidentally text him or sneak off to be with him. Every lie, every excuse, it was deliberate. The silence in the room was suffocating. Amanda's friends and family looked on, stunned. A few whispered among themselves, but most sat frozen, unable to reconcile the woman they knew with the one I was exposing. My voice softened, though the anger remained. Amanda, I trusted you. I built a life with you. And you shattered that trust for, what? For him. She dropped her gaze to the table, tears streaking her cheeks. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered. It just. Spare me the excuses, I said, my voice hard again. I've heard enough. This isn't about what you meant to do. It's about what you did. Amanda's mother spoke up, her voice shaky. David, please. Maybe we can. Fix this. I interjected. There's nothing left to fix. I've already contacted a lawyer. Amanda will receive the divorce papers tomorrow. Gasps erupted around the table. Amanda looked up sharply, her expression shifting from sorrow to panic. No. David, please. Don't do this. We can. No, Amanda, I said firmly. You made your choice when you decided to betray me. Now, I'm making mine. I turned to the table, addressing the stunned faces around me. I'm sorry to ruin your evening. This wasn't easy for me. But I thought you deserved to know the truth. Without waiting for a response, I set down my glass and walked away from the table. Behind me, I heard Amanda sobbing, her voice calling after me. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. The drive home was a blur. My chest felt tight, my mind racing. I knew I'd done the right thing, but the emotional weight of it all was crushing. Amanda's betrayal had cut deep, and though my actions had been calculated, they hadn't been easy. When I arrived home, the house was eerily quiet. The kids were at a friend's house for the night, sparing them from the drama that had unfolded. I sat in the living room, the silence pressing down on me. I thought about Amanda, the woman I'd loved, the woman I thought I knew. How had we gotten here? What had I missed? And most haunting of all, how would I rebuild my life from the rubble she'd left behind? The questions swirled in my mind as I sat there, staring at the darkened room. This wasn't the ending I'd envisioned when we said our vows. But it was the reality I now faced. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, paperwork, and difficult conversations with our children. But tonight, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my heartbreak, and the flickering hope that someday, I'd find a way to heal. The next morning dawned heavy with the aftermath of the previous night. The weight of what I had done lingered, but so did a sense of clarity. There was no going back now. I had ripped the curtain aside, exposing Amanda's betrayal for what it was. The marriage I had invested 15 years into was over, and all that remained was the task of dismantling what we had built. I sipped my coffee at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the sun climbing over the horizon. The silence in the house was deafening. Sarah and Ben were still at their friend's house, a small mercy that spared them from witnessing the fallout for the time being. I'd have to talk to them soon, explain why their world was about to change. But not today. Today was about logistics. My phone buzzed on the table, and I glanced at it. Amanda's name flashed on the screen, accompanied by a flurry of missed calls and messages. She had been relentless since I left the restaurant, alternating between tearful pleas for forgiveness and angry tirades accusing me of ruining her life. I silenced the phone, unwilling to engage. Instead, I picked up the manila folder sitting on the table. Inside were all the documents I'd gathered over the past few weeks, bank statements, emails, and photos. Evidence of her lies, her deceit, and her betrayal. I wasn't just being thorough, I was preparing for war. If Amanda wanted to fight me over custody, the house, or anything else, I wouldn't go into it blind. By mid-morning, I was sitting across from my lawyer, Allison Grant. She was sharp, professional, and no nonsense, exactly what I needed right now. "David," she began, flipping through the folder I'd handed her, "this is a strong case. With this level of evidence, you're in a solid position to secure primary custody of the kids and protect your financial interests. But I have to ask, are you sure you want to take this route? Divorce can be messy, especially when there's infidelity involved." I nodded, my resolve unwavering. "There's no salvaging this, Allison. She's been lying to me for over a year, and I can't let that kind of deception go unanswered. My kids deserve better." She nodded, her pen moving swiftly across the notepad in front of her. "Understood. I'll draft the papers and file them today. Expect to hear from Amanda's lawyer soon, assuming she retains one quickly. In the meantime, I recommend you start documenting everything. Every conversation, every interaction. It's all relevant." The session ended with a handshake, and as I walked back to my car, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The wheels were in motion. There was no turning back now. That evening, Amanda showed up at the house. I heard her car pull into the driveway, followed by the sound of her hurried footsteps on the porch. Moments later, the front door swung open, and there she was, disheveled, red-eyed, and clutching her purse like a lifeline. "David," she began, her voice shaky, "we need to talk." I stood in the living room, arms crossed. "About what, Amanda? The affair you had? The lies you told? Or the fact that you destroyed our marriage?" She flinched at my words, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sorry, okay? I know I messed up, but I never wanted it to end like this." "End like this?" I snapped. "Amanda, you didn't just mess up. You betrayed me. You betrayed our family. And you didn't think about the consequences for a second, did you?" She stepped closer, her voice rising in desperation. "It wasn't like that. I was lonely, David. You were always working, always busy. I felt invisible. So your solution was to cheat?" I shot back. "To crawl into someone else's bed instead of talking to me? Instead of trying to fix what we had?" Her face crumpled, and she sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, her voice muffled. "It started as nothing. Just a distraction. And then it became everything," I finished for her, my tone icy. "You let it consume you, Amanda. You let it destroy us." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "David, please. Don't let this end like this. We can fix it. We can go to counseling, talk to someone." "No," I said firmly. "There's no fixing this. I've already spoken to a lawyer. The divorce papers are being filed as we speak." Her eyes widened in shock. "You're serious?" "As serious as the lies you told me," I said. "You made your choice, Amanda. Now I'm making mine." For a moment, I thought she might argue. But instead, she stood, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "What about the kids?" she asked softly. "They're staying with me," I said. "You'll still see them, of course, but I'm not uprooting their lives because of your mistakes." Her bottom lip quivered, and she nodded slowly. "I love them, David. No matter what happens, I hope you'll remind them of that." "That's up to you," I said, my tone softer now. "You'll have to show them, Amanda. Actions speak louder than words." She left a few minutes later, her car disappearing down the street. As I stood in the doorway, watching her go, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and an inkling of relief. The chapter with Amanda was closing, but another one was beginning. And this time, it would be on my terms. Later that night, I called Sarah and Ben home. They deserved to be in their own beds, surrounded by the familiarity of their routines. They were my anchor now, the reason I couldn't let this ordeal break me. As I tucked Ben in, he looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. "Dad, is everything okay?" I hesitated, my throat tightening. "Not everything, buddy. But it will be." He nodded, seemingly satisfied, and closed his eyes. I lingered in his room for a moment, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. He was too young to understand what was happening, but I knew I owed him, and Sarah, the truth soon. Walking down the hall to my own room, I felt the weight of the day pressing on me. There was still so much to do, so many conversations to have. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to walk. And I wouldn't let Amanda's betrayal define the rest of my life. The weeks following Amanda's departure were a blur of legal meetings, custody arrangements, and the slow, grueling process of untangling our lives. Every day brought a new challenge, a new reminder of how much had been lost. But through it all, I held on to the one thing that mattered most, Sarah and Ben. They were my reason to keep moving forward, my light in the dark. The kids adjusted better than I expected. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, took on the role of mini-mom, helping around the house and looking after her younger brother. Ben, still too young to fully understand the gravity of what had happened, seemed content with my assurances that everything would be okay. I clung to their resilience, drawing strength from their ability to find normalcy in the chaos. Amanda moved into a small apartment a few miles away, her visits with the kids carefully scheduled and supervised at first. She tried to reach out to me several times, her messages alternating between regret and bitterness. I ignored them. There was nothing left to say. We were finished. One Friday evening, about 6 months after Amanda and I had separated, I decided to surprise the kids with a weekend camping trip. It was a rare stretch of sunny weather, and I thought the fresh air and adventure would be good for all of us. Sarah was hesitant at first, she preferred her books to the great outdoors, but Ben's excitement quickly won her over. We packed the car with tents, sleeping bags, and enough snacks to feed a small army. The drive to the campsite was filled with laughter and music, a fleeting glimpse of the life we'd once had before everything fell apart. For the first time in months, I felt like I was giving them something good, something pure and untainted by the shadows of the past. The campsite was nestled deep in the woods, surrounded by towering pines and the soft murmur of a nearby stream. We spent the first evening setting up our tents, roasting marshmallows, and telling ghost stories by the fire. Ben insisted on sharing his latest favorite, a tale about a wandering spirit who haunted campers who didn't put out their fires. Sarah rolled her eyes but indulged him, and the sound of their laughter warmed my heart. That night, as I lay in my sleeping bag, I stared up at the star-filled sky, feeling a rare sense of peace. For the first time since Amanda's betrayal, I thought that maybe, just maybe, we would be okay. The next day was perfect. We hiked to a nearby waterfall, skipping stones and splashing in the cold, clear water. The kids seemed happy, free from the weight of everything we'd been through. I snapped pictures of them grinning in the sunlight, their faces glowing with unfiltered joy. It felt like a turning point, a moment when the past no longer defined us. As the sun began to set, I started packing up the campsite while the kids played by the stream. I called out to them to stay close, my voice carrying through the trees. Sarah gave me a thumbs up, and Ben waved, his bright yellow jacket standing out against the greens and browns of the forest. I turned back to the fire, carefully dousing it with water to avoid any chance of a flare-up. The sound of the stream mixed with the crackle of the dying flames, creating a tranquil backdrop. It was peaceful, so peaceful that I didn't notice right away when the sound of laughter stopped. When I looked up, Ben was gone. Panic gripped me as I scanned the area, my eyes darting from tree to tree. "Ben!" I called, my voice rising. Ben. Where are you? Sarah appeared at my side, her face pale with worry. He was just here, she said, her voice trembling. I told him not to go too far. We searched the stream first, my heart pounding as I called his name over and over. There was no sign of him. The water was shallow, clear, he couldn't have gone far. But as minutes turned into an hour, the reality began to sink in. He was gone. I called the rangers, my voice shaking as I explained what had happened. Within an hour, a search team arrived, their flashlights cutting through the growing darkness. Sarah clung to me, tears streaming down her face as we followed the team through the woods, calling Ben's name into the void. The hours stretched into an eternity. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves sent a jolt of hope through me, only to be replaced by crushing disappointment when it wasn't him. As the night wore on, the temperature dropped, and the woods grew eerily quiet. It was just before dawn when they found him. I'll never forget the sight of the ranger emerging from the trees, cradling Ben's small, lifeless body in his arms. His bright yellow jacket was soaked, his face pale and still. My knees buckled, and I collapsed to the ground, a wail of anguish tearing from my throat. He must have slipped, the ranger said gently, his voice heavy with sorrow. The current carried him downstream. I held Ben in my arms, rocking him back and forth as the world shattered around me. Sarah knelt beside me, her sobs blending with mine. In that moment, nothing else mattered, not Amanda, not the betrayal, not the future. All I could feel was the unbearable weight of loss. The days that followed were a blur of grief. Amanda was devastated, her guilt and sorrow as palpable as my own. For the first time since our separation, we stood side by side, united in our pain. But even that couldn't bridge the chasm between us. Ben was gone, and with him, any hope of reclaiming what we had lost. In the end, the camping trip meant to heal us had become a tragic turning point. It was a cruel reminder that life could change in an instant, that even the best intentions could lead to unimaginable loss. And though Sarah and I would eventually find a way to move forward, a piece of us would always remain in that forest, where the sound of a laughing child had been silenced forever.